maybe there is a case to be made for them not trading him.
Well, listen, you would have to get a lot in return, and look at the compensation for Matthew Stafford. Watson is a younger, ascending player who's under contract for a while, and so if you're the Texans, look, it better be a king's ransom to move him, and I understand the bad blood, but there's a new regime there. There's a new GM, there's a new head coach, and I would be doing everything possible to try to salvage the relationship, because when you really look at it, look, it really comes down to one issue. He was upset about how it was communicated to him about his involvement in the hiring of the new GM and head coach. So if you can't get past that, then I think that's a problem. I think you need to try to get past that, and I would be really reluctant if I was Nick Caserio, if I was David Culley, in terms of moving on from Watson because he seems unhappy right now.
All right, so you're Nick Caserio now, Mike Tannenbaum. How are you handling this? You have continuously made the point on this show that with every day that goes by, they have a bigger and bigger problem. So there's whatever urgency you're feeling on that side, and then there's the hope that it doesn't ever go away on the other side. So how do you handle it?
Right. What's catastrophic for them is if they don't do something now, Greeny, and then they get into September and he doesn't show up, much what happened with Jalen Ramsey in Jacksonville. So if I'm Nick Caserio, I sit down with Deshaun Watson, his agent, I try to work it out. If I can't, I cut my losses right now and maximize the compensation I should get. Because again, worst case scenario, we get into the season, you're trying to establish a new head coach, David Culley, you don't have the player, and now all of a sudden, you don't have anybody else behind him because you thought he was going to be his quarterback. That is the worst case scenario. And Greeny, there's another big intangible here. There's not going to be any free agent who has a choice that's going to go to Houston right now until this situation is clarified.
Yeah, so they have all sorts of things lined up against them. But Kimberly, you were making the point, as we were talking earlier, that if they call his bluff, and I put that in air quotes because I don't think most people think he's bluffing, but if they do, they really do put the ball in his court to the extent that he's got to do a lot of things this fall, if he's still on that roster, that would seem to be out of keeping with his personality.
Yeah, people that know Deshaun, they describe him, he's a good kid. That's the first thing they say. We've seen the work that he's done in the community. He was just doing stuff this weekend. This is a guy that cares about the city of Houston, that cares about his teammates, a good locker room guy. So if you're the Houston Texans, that August, September, is he going to show up? That's the real key. I don't know if anyone expects that Deshaun will not show up because that seems so, quote, out of character. But if you're the Texans right now, you can say, okay, maybe we didn't hire the GM you wanted or the head coach, but what we have in David Culley is a guy who is respected around the league, an experienced guy, a guy that we brought in who we think can make you and this team better. And Nick Caserio, who may not have been your choice, but has been a coveted GM candidate for a long time. So if that's, Houston can say, we have these pieces to make the situation better for you.
All right, we will see. As of right now, he doesn't seem to be willing to give them a chance. Maybe he will ultimately have no choice. We'll leave that there for the moment. Much more football as we go, but to the NBA action.
I don't think he becomes the MVP candidate, but can he unlock him and get him to play good football again? Absolutely. The reason I say not an MVP candidate, Greeny, is if they try to kind of put this on Carson Wentz's back, then they're doing it wrong. The team is already built as a good team. They've got one of the best defenses in football. They've got a good runner, and they've got an excellent offensive line. It should really be about, Carson kind of being the last piece to this, where, he's going to a good team. This was the perfect spot for him to go and play well, but that doesn't mean he has to be the guy carrying it all, because what's been built around him by Chris Ballard and that Colts organization is really, really good already.
So, Mike T., let me then come to you. What is your expectation for him, particularly relative to the new surroundings? He's in a new division, a whole new start. What do you see?
Yeah, I think this is a little bit different than Tim. I think there's some desperation here. I think they negotiated against themselves, giving up 2 really high picks. And when you look at it, Greeny, in my opinion, they have the 4th best quarterback in the division. Ryan Tannehill has led Tennessee to the #1 offense since he's been there. I'm assuming Deshaun Watson's still a Texan. I know there's a lot there. And Trevor Lawrence is going to be a better quarterback than Carson Wentz. Carson Wentz struggled with confidence. He struggled with turnovers. And while I think he may be a little bit better than Luck, long term, I don't see this as a big improvement for the Colts.
Well, that's a really interesting one, and I will give you credit, Tannenbaum, because you were the one last year around this time who said the Steelers could wind up with the worst quarterback situation in their division. Everybody laughed at you, and no one is laughing so much right now. So Hasselbeck, I'll give you the first shot to laugh at this if you want to. Do you see Wentz right now as being the fourth best quarterback in that division?
No, and look, listen, I'd argue that Ben Roethlisberger was not the worst quarterback in that division last year. Joe Burrow would have been. When you look at the year Ben had, didn't end the way it wanted, but I think it was like 33 touchdowns and 10 picks. There's a lot of guys that would have taken that. Look, I look at that division. I understand what Mike's saying. That might be the case in 4 years, but when you look at it for this upcoming season, Trevor Lawrence in the first year in Jacksonville with that supporting cast versus Wentz in Indy with that supporting cast. No, I would take Wentz in that situation. In terms of Houston, listen, who knows what their situation is going to be? They may have a quarterback that refuses to show up. So, and again, I'll bring it back. It's not all about Wentz. Like in terms of teams, let's look at teams and how they're built. It's probably the best roster when you look at both sides of the ball in Indianapolis. So it's not about just which quarterback is better. It's the quarterback, supported by the team. It's still a dependent position.
And Kimberly, let me come to you here because I'm sure you talked to a lot of people over the weekend as people settled in with this deal that we knew was coming and finally got made. What is the overall reaction to the way this went down, Wentz to Indianapolis?
I think this is what everybody expected. This is a perfect situation for Carson Wentz. The key here is there will be an enormous amount of pressure on him. Like Matt's saying, Indy shouldn't make him do everything. But if you're Carson Wentz and you saw how things went down in Philly, your locker room presence was questioned, your play was questioned, whether you're a team leader was questioned, you're going to want to come into Indy and solidify yourself as the guy. Now, he's got Frank Reich. Is Frank Reich the key? Hopefully for Carson Wentz, it works out. Because if it doesn't work in Indy, a team that has a defense, a running game, all these pieces, and is just a quarterback away, if it doesn't work in Indy, I don't know where it works for Carson Wentz.
No, I completely agree. And we made the point last week here, and I said it on the radio. There is no player in the NFL who will be under more pressure next season than Carson Wentz. Historically, that's not been a good role for him. It doesn't mean that he can't do it. All right, Kimberly, let's run through the hurry up here. A bunch of other things, including we offer our congratulations to Patrick Mahomes. Why is that?
Well, Patrick Mahomes and his fiancée, Brittany Matthews, welcomed their baby daughter, Sterling Sky. She was born yesterday. So congratulations to Patrick Mahomes, the Chiefs quarterback, who is officially a girl dad. He joked during the Super Bowl that he wanted the baby to hold off a little bit until after the game. Well, she has done that.
Next up.
Moving on to Lamar Jackson. Now, is a contract extension on the horizon for Lamar? We think so. I've checked in and both sides have talked, but I'm told that the talks weren't anything substantive. But that doesn't mean that Lamar and the Ravens won't sit down and discuss a contract extension this season. Eric DeCosta, the GM, has already said we want to keep Lamar in Baltimore for a very, very